There you go.
Today we have Dr. Rohan D'Souza with us to talk about writing and submitting health research manuscripts for publication. And before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that the Alberta AbSPORU Support Unit patient engagement team works out of the University of Calgary, which is on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Districts 5 and 6. So before we get started, I'd just like to take a few minutes to provide a brief background to Dr. Rohan D'Souza, Associate Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology at McMaster University. Dr. D'Souza is also a very accomplished scientific writer, peer reviewer, including for several high-impact journals. I first had the honor of meeting Dr. D'Souza as he was a sponsor to the Patient and Community Engagement Research PACER maternal health team, whom he continues to enthusiastically support and mentor in their ongoing knowledge translation and dissemination efforts. This includes conference posters, a manuscript that's currently under review, and grant applications. I'd also like to add that I find Dr. D'Souza to be one of the most generous, inspiring, and equity balancing health researchers, collaborator, and academic supervisor I know. So I'm Ingrid, I'm the patient, many of you probably know me, I'm the patient engagement coordinator for the Alberta AbSPORU Support Unit, as well as the instructor for the PACER program. So for those of you that are comfortable doing so, if you'd like to share a little bit more about yourself, just so we can understand a little bit more of the audience, please feel free to put in the chat where you're calling from, and that could be a geographical location, it could be the institution you're affiliated with, your role in health research. So whether you're a patient research partner, whether you're a student, an academic researcher, please feel free to share. And then also just where you're at. Have you ever written or submitted a manuscript, either as a lead author or a co-author? And just before I turn it over to Dr. D'Souza, just a few housekeeping pieces. The presentation will be about 40 to 45 minutes long. We are recording, so the recording will be available after for those that have to leave early or that might have missed pieces they want to review again. And then we'll have a 15-minute question and answer period as well. Please feel free to follow up afterwards in an email if there's something you missed or you thought about later that you wanted to follow up on. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just ask, does anybody have any questions before we get started, or? No? Okay, then Dr. D'Souza, please feel free to take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. You always make me blush, smile. It's wonderful that to work with PACER. It doesn't feel like work. It just is. It's just such a joy to keep coming back to PACER to contribute in any way possible. And writing and publishing is something that that I love doing. So it is just about sharing some of my some of the tips that I've gathered over time. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. And while I do that, I'm going to acknowledge that I reside and work as part of my research group, which is called Flourish, the family-oriented and service user-centered research group in supporting health and pregnancy. This is based out of McMaster University, which is on the unceded territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Atenwinderok, and the Mississaugas of the First Credit Nations. I am an obstetrician by profession, and I acknowledge that for thousands of years before my arrival and before the arrival of other settlers in this land, people have birthed and have had their practices that should be cherished and that we should learn to acknowledge and revere. So I'm going to share. What I'm going to do is something unconventional. I'm just going to share my entire screen because I'm going to toggle between a presentation and taking you through how to find and how to search and how to use some other things. Is everybody able to see my screen? Okay, that's great. So, like I said, I'm a maternal fetal medicine physician or a high-risk obstetrician, and I practice out of McMaster University. I did not start my career off as a researcher or as somebody that wrote. I did that quite late in my career. My focus was always clinical medicine. I didn't care about reading papers or finding out what everybody else thought. I just wanted to know what to do with the patient in front of me. And that was how I practiced for a long time. And then something changed when I trained in India. I retrained in England. And just because I didn't think the training was enough, I came over to Toronto, and then I retrained in Toronto. And during my the third year of being in Toronto as a fellow, my supervisor and the chief of my unit suggested that I do a master's course. So this is towards the end of my training, not in the beginning of my training, after training 3 times over. And as part of that master's that I did, I suddenly had an epiphany. And that's when I realized, I said, when I treat a patient, I change the life of that one person in front of me. When I teach a group of 100 people and I influence them, I empower 100 people to change the lives of 100 more people in front of them. And I realized there was a certain hierarchy. I don't mean to dismiss or diminish any of the professions, or I don't mean to say that being a clinical practitioner is not as good as being a teacher. But I realized that there was so much more, the reach was so much more when one taught, as opposed to when one just sat in their own clinic and practice. And then I began to realize when I did my first master's that through research, you don't just change 100, but you change thousands of people through what you write. And it changed my view on the importance of the written word, the importance of publishing, and the manner in which one writes in order to convey to a vast audience. And over time, I have tried to refine my own way of writing. When I first started writing, it was very different from what I don't even read the papers that I've written earlier on because I cringe when I read them. Now, my writing style has changed. And what I'm going to share with you is some of the tips on that. So the agenda for today is basically going to be talking about what is peer-reviewed journal, what is peer review, and what does peer-reviewed journal mean? How do you know what is right for you, what journal is right for you? Understanding the submission guidelines, writing a manuscript, revisions and resubmissions. I can talk about more things if there is time, but I'd like to leave time for questions because all of this is to help you. Not to show you how much I know, but to help you with writing a manuscript when it comes to doing that. So when we talk about peer-reviewed journals, we're talking about journals. The other word for them is refereed journals. So a refereed journal has got an editorial board of subject experts. So when you submit a paper to a peer-reviewed journal, this editorial board reviews this. If they've got the expertise, they will critically appraise what you have done. As both clinical experts as well as content experts, methodological experts. If they don't have the expertise, they will send it out to other relevant experts so that you get reviewed or critiqued by peers. And then this evaluation is completed before deciding whether to accept this paper or not. This is as opposed to non-peer-reviewed journals where they just reach out to you and say, hey, you want to write a paper, you write a paper, it gets published. And one of the things that I want to highlight here is the importance of peer review. Peer review is extremely important because a lot of people around the world work in the same areas that we work in and have learned from mistakes and from experiences and from having done a certain job for a very long time. And getting critiques from them and getting reviews from them actually enhances our own work and ensures that any errors that we might have made are not there anymore. So it's really important to have this peer review process for any kind of opinion or any kind of non-science fiction to get published in a peer review journal, which is the reason why we have peer reviewing as a safeguard against. It is also important to know that there are a lot of journals out there that are called predatory journals. If you've published any one paper and you are the corresponding author on that paper, you will find that every morning you will wake up to 20 emails coming from people saying, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I read your paper about so-and-so and so-and-so journal. I would love for you to write something here, and I will waive your publication fees. And these emails are not uncommon. And when you've done 150 publications, it's those many times 5 every morning that you will get emails about. So how can you tell a predatory journal from a non-predatory journal? There is a list that has been generated, and so I'm going to, as I said, I was going to toggle between different. I'm sorry, that's not the one. Let me just copy and paste this one. There are a number of lists that have been generated now that can show you which journals are on this predatory journal list. So this is one such list, and I will share my presentation with you and also these links so that you can see all the publishers that are doing this for money. They are not legitimately peer-reviewed journals, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So if you get an email from someone saying, do you want to write to me? You want to, oh, sorry, am I still sharing my screen? Oh, sorry.
No,
sorry.
Now you are sharing.
Yeah, let me just do that again. I'm sorry. So this was the list that I was mentioning to you. So it's called the Beals list of potential predatory journals and publishers. Whenever you get an email from somebody, if you want to know whether it's legitimate or not, you can just put that name in the search engine and it'll pick up to see whether this is a predatory journal or not. You do not want to publish in these journals because the credibility is in question, and they will accept anything you send them, but they will make you pay for it. And when you put this on your CV and you send your CV or resume to somebody, they will immediately know that this is not a worthwhile journal, and that affects your credibility and your integrity as well. So this is one of the first things to know. You always want to publish in a peer-reviewed journal. So I'm just going to keep this mode open if that's okay, and if you can still see. So how do you find out what journal is right for you? So in order to answer that question, we start with the article type. Are you talking about publishing some original research that you've done, or are you talking about publishing other article types? Original research would mean quantitative research, like a case-controlled study, or a cohort study, or a randomized controlled trial, or a systematic review and meta-analysis. These are quantitative research studies. Or as part of PACER, you do a lot of qualitative research methods where you do interviews and focus groups. That's qualitative research. That's all original research. Or mixed methods research, where you use a combination of quantitative as well as qualitative methods to inform one another. Very, very strong type of research. So these kind of original research types are called original research studies. All other articles like commentaries, narrative reviews, editorials, letters to the editor, those things are considered non-original research. For original research, when you're trying to provide original research, and that is going to be the focus of the rest of my talk, you want to know your audience. Who are you writing for? Do you want this work that you've done to change the practice of primary care providers? Do you want it to change the work of obstetricians, of nurses, of midwives? Do you want this to change policy? Do you want this to inform what further research is conducted? Or do you want to inform your colleagues or the community? So that question is very, very important to answer before you decide which journal. There is no point if you think that the obstetricians in Canada are doing pregnant individuals a disservice, there is no point in writing something about it in the Journal of Midwifery, because the obstetricians are not reading it, right? So what you want to do is you want to know your audience. You want to know your audience not only so that you know whom to target, but also to know the language that you use. You want to use a more scientific language when you're writing to researchers or to clinicians. You want to use a more policy-based, political, government, or even lay language when you're talking to people that are that are heading policy. So understanding your audience is very, very important. And then understanding the journal specifics. And I'll show you how to make a decision on which journal to go with. But the scope of the journal. There are some journals that focus on just clinical care. There are some journals that focus just on methods. There are some journals that focus on only quantitative research. So if you're going to say, oh, I want my paper in so-and-so journal, but that is outside, your paper is outside the scope of the journal, you're wasting your time. Formatting a paper to a journal specifications takes a lot of time, and you do not want to waste your time without knowing what the scope of the journal is. A lot of people focus on impact factor. An impact factor, some people love it, some people hate it, is an important metric. It shows, it's in a nutshell, it gives you an idea about how much impact the publications in that journal have had or are having. And so you have a 1-year impact factor, a 2-year, a 5-year impact factor for journals. And I'll show you how to find those as well. The high impact journals are read by more people. There is also this bias that we all have. All humans are biased. If we see that a paper is published in a very high impact journal, we assume that it's a better paper. Not always the case, but we assume that. So the high impact journals also have a very wide distribution list. Every morning I get something from JAMA and something from BMJ because I might at some point in time have signed up or not. And so whether I like it or not, I see a lot of things from the British Medical Journal or from the New England Journal of Medicine or from Lancet or from the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. So if you want something to reach out widely, you want to consider a journal that has got a higher impact. One of the newer things now that many of the funding organizations are emphasizing on is open access. It is not uncommon when you read something you try to do a search on Google and a paper comes up, and then you click on the paper, it says, well, if you want to access this paper, you need to pay so-and-so, so-and-so. And then, of course, you're stuck because you don't have that amount of money to pay for just reviewing a paper, and so that paper doesn't get read. And in higher income countries and for people that belong to universities, we can always get access to these papers through universities. But for people in low-income countries and low and middle-income countries and those that are not affiliated with universities, the people from the community, they don't have access to these papers. And that is why there is a focus now on trying to publish in open access journals. What this means is that there is a cost incurred for publishing. The journal bears a cost for publishing. Normally, in the not open access journals, you submit a paper to the journal decides whether they want to accept it or not. If they've decided to accept it, they publish it in the journal, but anybody that wants to access it has to pay to access it. So the reader pays to access it. Now, all of you would agree that from an equity lens, that is not fair because many people cannot afford to access this, but they still want to have the knowledge. So to circumvent this problem, the journal still has to recover money. So where does it get its money from? It gets its money from the person publishing. So it gets its money from you. If you're writing the paper and submitting it, they tell you, this is the cost for you to publish. We will accept your journal. This is the cost for you to publish your journal, your article in our journal. And then anybody in the world will be able to access this for free. So that puts a lot of pressure upon people that are publishing, but we as publishers generally can avail of some kind of discounts from our universities, some kind of waivers from universities, some kind of funding through organizations. And so this is what is currently being encouraged for us to make papers open access, for us to bear the brunt of the cost so that readers can get it for free. So if you want something to reach out to the community, you want to consider open access. That is the more important thing than impact factor. If you want to reach out to clinicians and you want to reach out to busy clinicians that are not going to read the small impact factor journals, but something in a big journal, you want to go for impact. But all of this depends, again, upon the scope of the journal. So I'm going to go on to the next slide. And I'm going to put another, this is the other link. In order to find the best journals in your field, there are various ways of finding it, but I find that this one, this Imago Journal and Country Rank Index, generally puts a very good, it categorizes all the journals in the specialty that you want. So here, if you're doing something in, we're just going to assume that everybody's doing something in medicine. So we just do medicine. And I'm just going to give you an example. There are so many subject categories. You want to do something in obstetrics and gynecology, and you want it for all regions of countries. So what you do is when you put those search terms in, this will generate the highest, the journals in descending order of their SJR or their Simago journal ranking, right? And that is a cluster of a lot of variables. So what you can see in the field of obstetrics and gynecology, the journal with the highest impact is Human Reproduction Update, right? The second is the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Third is Ultrasound and Obstetrics and Gynecology. Then there's Lancet Western Pacific. Then there's the Green Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, BJOG, which is the British Journal. So there's a long list of them, and it gives you all the other details if you want to know about H-index, how many documents were published in 3 years, how many references, how many citations. But this is a rank that is generally, I find, very, very helpful. Here in green, you will see the quartile. And a quartile will tell you these are the top tier journals. Quartile 1 is the top tier journals. They are also very, very unlikely to accept qualitative research, unfortunately, or research that is done with smaller numbers. So they are looking for very big randomized trials. They're looking for practice-changing papers. Then you will, as you go down, you will see there are a total of 210 papers in obstetrics and gynecology. Here we're changing to tier 2 or quartile 2. These are not bad journals. Among the 210 journals in obstetrics and gynecology, the first 25% are tier 1 journals, quartile 1 journals, then you have quartile 2 journals. So if you look at this will tell you not only where this journal is positioned, it will, if you click on this button, it'll tell you what the scope and the subject area and the category of this is. So you can look at it and say, oh, this is a bi-monthly journal. It's only about reproductive medicine. It's talking about male and female infertility, reproductive physiology, pharmacology. That's not what I'm doing. Okay, let me just go back. That's not my journal. How about Journal of Sexual Medicine? So you can go through this. This is a one-stop shop that will tell you the scope of the journal. It'll tell you the ranking of the journal. It'll tell you the quartile. And it'll also tell you through this little orange lock here, whether it's open access or not. So this is open access, which means you pay in order for your readers to get it for free. All right, so I hope that's clear. I'm happy to pause here if anyone has got any questions, but this is how you look for your journals. Once again, going back to what type of research are you doing? Who is the audience you're trying to reach out? What are the journal specifics? And in order to get these journal specifics, a good way is to look at this Simago journal and country rank. Okay, I will continue. I don't see any hands raised, so I will continue. There's then the issue of submission guidelines. And the submission guidelines are different for different journals. So I have taken submission guidelines, I've presented links for 2 separate journals, and you'll see that they're slightly different. So clicking on the first one, which is not going to click because here, this is Ultrasound and Obstetrics and Gynecology. Spend some time looking at what the submission guidelines look like, right? You will find this in any journal that you click, you will find something like author guidelines. So you go to the author guidelines and they give you a very detailed account of what they expect. If you do not follow the author guidelines, the editorial board will reject your paper or will send it back to you for revision. So it makes sense to spend some time looking at what they want and what format they want things in. So here, the Ultrasound and Obstetrics Journal talks about the submission and manuscript guidelines. They talk about the general instructions. The language that they want is American English. So please, when they say American English, use spell check and change all the British spelling or the Canadian spelling to American English, because if it doesn't comply with requirements, they'll send it back to you and say, you have not complied with requirements. Some editorial boards are great. They will tell you specifically what you've not done. Some others will just send it back to you and say, comply with the guidelines and then send it back to us. And you don't know what it is that you're not complied with. I'll give you one example. I submitted to one journal, I shall not mention the name, and in the abstract section, I had background, methods, results, and conclusion. They sent this back to me 3 times, telling me that the formatting was not correct. I had not complied with guidelines. And I was in tears by the end of it because I went through the submission guidelines 3 times and I thought everything was perfect. I finally wrote to the editor and said, I don't know what it is that I'm doing wrong. Can somebody tell me? And they said, in the abstract, we want the term materials and methods, not just methods. Can you believe that? I wanted to be one materials and method. And when I said, and that was why this paper was rejected 3 times. It takes weeks, right? Because I've got to go through all of this in my busy schedule at work and try to make these corrections. And they said, yes, that was the reason. Because if you couldn't be diligent enough to follow our guidelines, then that speaks a lot to your, how serious you are about your research, which I don't agree with, but that is the impression people have. So be very careful about the submission guidelines. They talk about double space, line numbering, page numbering. It should be submitted in Word. PDF will not be accepted. Manuscript text should be continuous. They want abbreviations. They want footnotes. They want SI, standard international units used throughout. So no pounds, they want kilograms. Then I'll talk to you about authorship in just a minute. If there has been patient information that's been shared, that has to be anonymized prior. If patient consent is required, that needs to be provided. Ethical approval needs to be provided. This is what the title page should look like. And I will go over the title page in just a bit. This is what your abstract should look like. This is what your figure should look like. They should be at least 600 pixels and not the resolution. If it's not, then they're not going to accept it. This is what your figure legend should look like. This is what your tables should look like. Each table should be provided on a separate page. All tables should be specifically cited. So if you ask me to give you a talk on what submission guidelines should be, I can't, because every journal has its own submission criteria. But I will give you some tips. In general, if your abstract is about 350 words, the range is 250 to 500. But if you keep your abstract to about 350 words, if you divide it into 4 sections, introduction, methods, results, conclusion, if you follow some other basic principles about writing a title page, and if you keep your word count under 4,000 words, if you keep the total number of figures and tables under 5, you've almost certainly fulfilled the criteria for all journals in general. And I'll repeat this again, but you should try and it's difficult because if you choose a journal and you say, I'm going to put all my time preparing something for this ultrasound and obstetrics and gynecology, and you spend weeks preparing for this, and you submit it to them, and within 3 days they tell you, sorry, we're not interested in your paper, we're rejecting it. Now you've got to redo this whole thing for another journal. And that's why I say keep it generic, keep it about 4,000 words, keep it 3 to 5 tables, because then the smaller changes that you have to do are generally minor and they're not a big problem. Another big point is the reference style, and I have got a slide and I'll show you about this reference style as well. Every journal has its own way of referencing papers, and I will take you through this. And if you don't follow the reference style, your paper will be sent back, of course. If you try to do this manually, it takes very, very long. So you should use bibliographic software, and I'll show you why that is important too. So this is just one example of submission guidelines. So don't wonder what my submission guidelines should be. Go to the journal and look at the author guidelines, and you'll find it there. There is another one, which is the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They have got their own submission guidelines, and so I'm just going to share that with you in just a second. Here. So as you will see, they've got different aims and scope. They talk about the different article types. They want different things. They want a tweetable statement. So you've got to prepare all these things depending on what a journal wants. For the original research, they want a background, they want objectives, they want study design. Remember when I said there are generally 4 headings? Background, methods, results, conclusion. Some have 5, some have 6, some have 3, some merge methods and results. But if you keep it to that 4, you can always merge or play around with it a little bit. you see, these people have said your abstract should be 500 words, but at least 250 words. That's why I say keep it about a 350 word, try and make it about 350 words. It will be easy to adapt it to different journal types. They want a background. They also want a separate objective. They don't want the word methods. They want it to be called study design. They want results. They want conclusions. So pay attention to these kind of details. And it sometimes helps to have a student or somebody else to just do this for you so that you can focus on the actual work and the content, and they can ensure that the formatting is done right. So these are just two examples. Like I said, they're all going to be in the presentation, which I will share. So you can go over them. And you don't have to memorize these, because if you're planning on submitting to a third journal, the submission guidelines are going to be completely different. That brings me to the title page. And in the title page is not just about the title, but the title is the single most important thing. Because the title summarizes the main idea or the ideas of your study. And a good title should contain the fewest possible words that adequately describe the content and the purpose of your research paper, right? When you're writing a title, when I started writing, and I say I cringe when I think about things that I did in the past, I used to think about medical writing or scientific writing as journalism. So I wanted to have a peppy and an interesting title that was a play on words. I remember writing something against cesarean sections performed on maternal request, so without an indication. The numbers were going up, and I was asked to write about it. And so that was cesarean sections in the absence of a medical indication. And the title of that paper, the title I chose for that paper was "To See or Not to See." To see, in the sense C-section, to see or not to see. And I was very pleased with myself, because I said, this is like a play on to be or not to be. And I was very happy with myself, but nobody was finding that paper at all, because I should tell people, I've written this thing on cesarean on maternal request, and people would type on Google cesarean on maternal request, and they would never find the paper. So nobody is going to find your paper if you're trying to be too clever, right? Just be to the point. Your title is extremely, extremely important. If you've done a study on comparing exercise versus a medication for weight loss, say exercise versus medication X for weight loss, a randomized controlled trial, people will find it. People will know what it's about by reading the title. Trying to do something clever sometimes did not help. So trying to have fewest words as possible to describe very clearly what you want to do in that. There is this very interesting paper that I found. It is in the Saudi Journal of Obstetrics, or Saudi Journal of, I can't remember, anesthesia, I think, written by a very, very well-known editor. And it talks about just writing the title and abstract for a research paper. Being concise, precise, and meticulous is key. And this person goes through a lot. I'm not going to go over all of this. Descriptive or neutral titles, declarative titles, interrogative titles, drafting a suitable title, a checklist for a good title, and then gives examples of different titles and comments or remarks on what these titles are and why they're not ideal and how they could be made better. So who knew that somebody could write a whole paper on how to write a title and abstract? But somebody clearly did. And then there's a lot about the abstract. Remember that even if your paper is not open access, your abstract will always be accessible to everybody. The abstract is the face of your paper. Less than 2% of people that are interested in the topic will read your paper, but 100% of them will read your abstract. So you want to put in your abstract all the information. You've got to be very careful about what information you put there and what you leave out, because you've only got 250 words, not 4,000. So there's a lot of this information which I'm not going to go over in detail, but again, I'll send this to you so that you can go over this and just help yourself write better abstracts and title pages. With regard to formatting and style, I am not going to go into a lot of detail because the formatting and style is dictated by the journal. Journals will tell you, we want the font to be Times New Roman. It has to be at least 12 font. It has to be double spaced. You've got to just follow what they tell you to do. That's what formatting is. They will tell you about what kind of margins, they will tell you about whether they want page numbers, how they want line numbers. So it's about basically following what the guidelines tell you. What I will share with you now is an example of a title page. It's something that is very dear to my heart. I can see Rizwana is on this call. She has helped me prepare all these title pages. And so I'm hoping that you can still see my screen. This is an example of a title page. I'm just going to increase the font a little bit. So as you can see, there is a title determining the safety and factors responsible for adverse outcomes following outpatient induction of labor. And what Rizwana has done here is she has clearly told me ahead of time that my title has to be as concise as possible. This is not Rizwana's comments, these are the comments from the journal. As concise as possible, approximately 12 words without abbreviations, or so these are these things so that I know when I'm writing the title that I comply with it. Let me give you I've got a lot of anecdotal stories. I'll just share a few of them. So I remember a paper that we were writing, and there were 23 authors on this paper, and 23 authors is something you should not do. The fewer the number of authors, the easier to get a paper published. But getting comments from 23, when 12 say one thing, 13 say another thing, is not easy. So we managed to get everybody's comments, incorporated all comments. Everybody had comments on the title, and finally we got the title ready and we were ready to submit. At the time of submission, there were 18 words in the title, and the journal only allowed 12 words. So now we had to go back to 23 authors with revised versions of the titles, which took 2 more months. Right? All this problem can be solved if you have a title page template. So if you know what you're doing and keep your titles to about 12 words, all journals will accept that. Some will accept 14, but 12 words is generally good. So prepare this template. When you're writing your authors, good practice is always to capitalize the surname or the family name of the author and put small letters for the first name of the author. And this is important, especially when you have someone like, let's say, Peter Lloyd. Either of them could be the surname, and people don't know whether your surname is Peter or your surname is Lloyd. So you capitalize the surname, and that's generally a very good practice. Or you put the surname in bold, so that people know which one is the surname and which one is the first name. Right? So it's not just generally the first name and the surname. You should put in your credentials. There's a difference between credentials and affiliations. Credentials are your degrees. Most journals will accept up to 3 degrees or maybe 2. So I could put MD, PhD because this journal accepted 2, but if they wanted 3, I would add an FRCOG. Some of them will add just 1. So you can put up to 3, the journal can then take it off. Right? Always ask your authors what credentials they want to go by, because people get very offended if they are a PhD and you put an MSc there, or if they are an MD and you put a PhD instead, because you've got an MD and a PhD and so you always should ask. So send an email out and say, this is my title page, this is the list I have going. Are you happy with the way your name is spelled? Are you happy with your credentials? And are you happy with your affiliations? Very good practice. Once it's published, it's very, very difficult to go back. And there have been wars between universities because authors have not been listed in the right way, or because the university has not been given the right credit. In general, people move on. I was at Mount Sinai Hospital, University of Toronto. I'm now at McMaster University. There was work that I did there at Mount Sinai Hospital that I didn't complete, but I published it when I was at McMaster. I have to, in the correct conscience, put Mount Sinai Hospital, University of Toronto as my first affiliation for work that was done when I was there. I cannot give credit to McMaster University as my first affiliation, although that's where I might be right now. And this is what I mean by wars between universities. They get very upset because the credibility of the ranking of the university depends upon how many first author publications, how many senior author publications. And so this is really, really critical. This is something that you can make a lot of enemies and you might lose research collaborators forever if you don't do this right. So always, regardless of how much of a rush you are in to get this published, let everybody take a look, ask them specifically, look at the spelling of your name, your credentials, your affiliations, see that you agree with it, because this is what we're going to submit. This journal required us to put conflicts of interest. I've got conflicts of interest later, and I'll talk to you about that and the source of funding. They also wanted paper presentation information. So if this was presented as an oral presentation or a poster at a conference, they wanted that on the title page. They wanted conference details, whether it was poster or oral, the reference number, the date of the presentation, the conference, the venue, city, province, country, and the dates. This is the requirement of the journal. So every title page is different. They want the corresponding author details. The corresponding author details are, the corresponding author is generally the most senior author. And you provide the name, the address, the fax number. Some journals still require a fax number. I don't know what number that is because I don't have a fax, so I don't know what number that is. That probably is my fax number from the University of Toronto that I picked up. But the problem is if you don't provide them with the boxes, you can't submit. And then the email address. It's always good practice on your title page to tell them what your word count is. Your abstract, my abstract was 365 words out of the 500 word upper limit. My main text was 2,970 words out of the 3,000 word upper limit. You can write here how many tables and how many figures you have and supplementary data. This journal also required a condensation, which is a one-sentence condensation of the paper so they could tweet it. They wanted a short title or a running title that could go on the top of every page of the journal. They wanted a 130-word summary called AJOG at a glance, the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology at a glance, which is why was the study conducted, what are the key findings, and what does the study add to what is already known? So every journal is different. Not all journals require this, but you need to know the specifications so that at the last minute when it's time for submission, you're not scampering to start creating all this new material. All right. I'm going to go back in the interest of time to authors and authorship briefly. So this is an example of a paper where we had a list of authors. I'm not going to go into the details, but the first author is generally the person who has done most of the work, whose study this is. This person could be, is generally a student or a trainee or a junior researcher who has done all the data gathering, all of the other work. In between, people that have contributed, but not as much, would be in placed written in order. And generally, the person whose name is last is the senior author or the corresponding author of the paper. So that's the person who takes responsibility. This is generally how things work, but not necessarily so. Who is an author? You don't just put friends and family down as authors. That was done a lot in the past. This is not what you do, right? And that's why now every journal requires you to put a contributors list. Don't just put, there have been instances where primary authors, 2-year-old children were listed as authors on the paper in the interest of their CVs becoming better when they went to medical school. This is all unethical, right? And so there's a huge crackdown on authorship. Authorship means somebody has to contribute. If a 2-year-old can do this, fine. But if not, then that person has no business being an author. So the person has to have substantial contribution to the conception or design of the work, or its acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data. So they need to have either drafted the work, reviewed it critically for important intellectual content, and have had the final approval of the version to be published, and they should agree to be accountable for all aspects of the work in ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or the integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. So it is only individuals that meet all of these 3 criteria that are allowed to be authors on a paper, right? There is this wonderful, wonderful document, and I think I've got it here, which again, I'm going to share with you at the end. And that is the International, this is the International Journal of Medical Editors. They've got this 20-page document on how to conduct, report, edit, and publish work in medical journals. They've got everything, every question answered. Why authorship matters, who is an author, what is the meaning of non-author contributions? All of these things are very, very clearly outlined in this. So I'm going to go a little quickly because I realize that it's already just 10 minutes to 2. I'm going to speak briefly now about the I'm happy to continue at another point as well if we need to. But the anatomy of an abstract, the beginning of, like I said, everybody reads your abstract. If you open PubMed, you see your abstract. You open Google, you see an abstract. The abstract tells people that don't have access to the full text and who have no time or interest in reading the full text. What is this paper about? You need to be very, very precise about what is the background and why you did this study, right? You want to tell them what you did. The methods are about what you did. You're not presenting any results there, just what you did. I conducted a qualitative interview based on grounded theory, wherein so-and-so was done. That is my methods. My results. I interviewed 16 people. The demographics of the people were so-and-so, so many white, so many from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, whatever. That is a results section. And the conclusions is, based on the results, what can I conclude about what I did? Remember that you cannot conclude or write in your conclusions something that is not presented in the results. You cannot, right? You cannot, so it all has to flow in. This is why I did it. This is what I did in answer to ask my question. This is what I found, and this is what I can conclude based on what I found, right? So that is your abstract. How much information? You want to give the key information, the information that you're confident about, the information that you've got strong evidence for. How many words? Like I said, some journals will say 250, some will say 500. 350 is a good sweet spot. Try and keep it short. Then we have the keywords. Like I said, my paper on to see and not to see would never have been picked up if I was not sensible about my keywords. But I put the keyword cesarean, spelled both in British spelling as well as in American spelling. Medical request, operative birth. I put in some keywords so that people searching for anything would be able to find it. Why are keywords important? Keywords are important because they are used by the search engines like PubMed and Medline, etc., to index journals. So when you submit something, based on the keywords, they are indexed into categories so that people can find them. There are some words called controlled vocabulary terms. I'm not going to go into the details. And some are called simple keywords. So you want to put a good mix of both. I said I won't go into details, but maybe I will. So in Medline, there is something called the medical subject headings. So a word like forceps, right? Is the indexed term for it is obstetrical forceps. So if you just put the word forceps, it would not get categorized here. So what you want to do is you want to put that word into this engine, like the National Library of Medicine, and say, my paper is about forceps. And then when you put the word forceps, then say, okay, it's obstetrical forceps. That's the word I should be using. So as a keyword, I would use the word obstetrical forceps, not just forceps, because it wouldn't get indexed in the right place. If I want to talk about preeclampsia, preeclampsia is a term. Great. So it's a term, so we can include the word just as it. If I want to put pregnancy-induced hypertension, so many of the words that we use in common language may not. So this is how it is indexed. It's indexed hypertension, pregnancy-induced. So there are certain codes for indexing, and it's always nice to use words that are used by the indexes so that it can find itself can be placed in the right categories. Briefly, I'm going to talk about attachments. So tables and figures, like I said, you should have at the most a combination of any combination of up to 5. So you can have 3 figures in 2 tables, 2 figures in 3 tables, all 5 figures, all 5 tables, but not more than that. If there are more, you want to put them into your supplementary data. The supplementary data doesn't come out in the main printed manuscript, but it is available online for people to access. So anything that's really big, anything that's not critically important for people to see, put it as supplementary data and keep only the key things as attachments. I'm going to go very briefly about reporting guidelines. This is very important. How to report a paper depends upon what kind of work you've done, right? Even a survey has got a method in which to report it. And what type of reporting guidelines to use are all on this website, equatornetwork.toolkits. When you go to that and you click on any of these, you will get a reporting checklist. So if yours is a qualitative study, then you want to use this, the SRQR or the Core Q checklist to see that you've presented the data in a certain way. All right. So I'm not going to spend more time on that. I really don't think I don't think there's much time, right, Ingrid, to talk about. We're just 5 minutes from the close.
Yeah.
I can.
Not,
So what, you know what I could do? I'm always happy. I'm going to share all this with you anyway. I'll share these slides and all these links with you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you. I'll just tell you very, very briefly. And in terms of questions, if there are any questions, just feel free to just send them to Ingrid maybe, or to send them to me. I'll put my email address in the chat box, so you could just send them to me. But it might be better for you to send them to Ingrid actually on second thought, because I can barely get through my emails, and then she can compile them and send them to me, and I can reply. But when you're writing a background, remember that the background has got to be very, very short. Your background shouldn't be more than 250 words. Nobody wants, you're not writing a textbook on the topic. All you want to write is, what is the magnitude of the problem? Why are you studying migrant health in Canada? Why is it a big thing? What is known about it? What is not known about it? And what is your study going to tell you? That's all you need to say in your introduction. There's no need of saying anything more than that. It's generally 4 thoughts or 4 ideas. And it can fit into one letter-sized paper if you double space it. In the methods, follow the reporting guidelines, but remember, you're not putting any results, nothing about what you found, only what you did. I conducted so-and-so, I recruited using so-and-so, I did this, I did that, I did that. What you did is your methods. The results is what you found. I'm doing this as on the fly. So what you found. So this is what you did, and this is what you found. And the discussion is contextualizing it. So what we're doing in the discussion is you start off by saying, okay, you've read all about my background, my methods, my results. Now, this is my summary statement. That is your first line of your introduction, your first paragraph of your introduction. Then you want to tell people, how does this fit in with the light of what is already known? For example, what you might want to say is that prior to this work, this is what people believed. Now, as a result of my work, this is what people are going to have to believe. And you have to trust my work more because I did this, and this, which other studies have not done. So you've got to compare your work or contextualize it in the light of what others know. You can't just say, throw something at people and say, trust me. You've got to convince them that you've read what the literature says so far. And if yours is different, you've got to explain why it is different and why people should trust you more than trust somebody else. That's contextualizing. And then you want to talk about the implications. The implications of your work to clinical practice. There may not be any. Your work may be more a policy thing or future research thing. It doesn't matter. But think about these headings. What is the direct result of what I'm doing to clinical practice? What is the implication to health policy? What is the implication to future research? What are the strengths of my work? But more importantly, what are the limitations? Don't try to hide those limitations, because if you don't mention them, your reviewer will pick every single one of them and say, these are the 15 reasons why a paper should not be published. The best thing to do is to say, I have identified 15 limitations in my paper, but despite these limitations, trust it because 1, 2, 3. If you mention that you show the awareness of your limitations and you put it out there, reviewers are very likely to say, okay, got it, you thought about it. And then, of course, your conclusion, which is a summary of this whole thing. I won't go into references in details because it's going to take time, but I would tell you to try and use software to do these references, because you see what this is EndNote. There's a paper here from here to here, and there are 25 references. So you can see the things highlighted here in gray. These are automatically generated references. Now, if you've done all of this work and you put it in a certain way, and then a journal says, oh, I don't like Vancouver style. I want you to do New England Journal Medicine style. You just click that button, New England Journal Medicine, and the software will change the entire thing to New England Journal Medicine format. right? And you don't have to manually do it. If it says, no, I want it in the Lancet style, you just press the button Lancet, and all the references will get transferred into Lancet style. If you decide that you want to cut out this whole section, and you update your citations and bibliography from the 25 citations, everything, the ones that you remove will be removed and they will be put out there. If you then decide that you want to put that paragraph down here and you update citations, all the things will get renumbered automatically and you will get your full 25 citations back. So essentially what I'm saying is that if you try to do this manually, every time there's a small edit, you're going to have to spend a lot of time. EndNote is available for free for most students and many universities, but it's not a very expensive thing. And if you plan on publishing for a long time, you should consider investing in a license on EndNote. So this is about references. I'm sorry I've taken so long, but it is 3 o'clock my time, and I will stop here in case you have any pressing questions that I can answer. Speechless. That's a lot. I know that's a lot for one 1 hour session, but I hope that was helpful in some way. Right. So,
Doctor, oh, sorry. I have a question. So you were talking about the list that we can know is not recommended to publish in the journal that is on the list because lack of credibility. So is like are you gonna share with us those lists, or we can find it in any specific place to have a reference for us?
I will share everything with you. I'll share the list with you because this list is constantly updated. It's a big money-making racket. There are a lot of people sitting in some parts of the world that are creating these websites which look very good and saying, oh, we are preparing a new journal and sending emails out to people and getting $500 from all these people and then publishing this somewhere. This is not, it's not peer reviewed, and you can fall prey to it. And this number changes. So there is a list of publishers, there's a list of journals within the publishers, and almost all the journals are from a small group of publishers sitting in some parts of the world. So I will share that with you.
Okay, thank you. And the other question is the peer reviewed is the journals that you recommend that we publish on, but so the list that is not very recommended, they're changing constantly. Is that possible that those journals can be on the peer review list that is recommended, or it doesn't happen very often?
The predatory journals are not peer-reviewed journals. They're not on this list. The Scimago journal list, which I showed, those are authentic. They follow all the International Council of Medical Journal Editors requirements. So the ones that are on those lists, the ones that are indexed on PubMed, they are all journals that you can trust.
Okay.
I would say it's very difficult for a person writing a paper for the first time to decide which journal to submit to. Very difficult. It's almost impossible. You need a lot of background experience with this. So always speak to your senior advisor, who might also turn to some other people and say, listen, this is the work that I'm doing, which is the best journal for this. And I do this a lot. And so I could just read the abstract and say, well, this one should go here. And these people are most likely to take it. So ask for help. There was one question about how much process changes for commentaries. So commentaries are generally invited. And you write a commentary when you're at when you are considered a world expert. Because if you and I decided to write a commentary on climate change, nobody's going to be interested in what we think, right? It's these you want, so commentaries, etc. They require a very balanced and nuanced approach. There's a lot of opinion that goes into it, not just evidence, not what you found. It is when there is a lot of conflicting evidence out there in the literature, you've got to sift through all of that and present an unbiased opinion. It's a very difficult thing to write. It's a very, very difficult thing to write. And so I think it doesn't fit into any of these things. There's no structure. You decide the structure.
And so thank you for that. And there's one more question about how many journals you can submit to at one time.
Only one. you have to guarantee. So one of the other things, Rizwan is on this call. I think, Rizwan, what we can do is I can update this a little bit and also give you an example of some cover letters. When you write a cover letter to the journal, you have to promise them that this is not under consideration by any other journal, that this is going to be the sole, the guarantor of the paper has to mention that this work, no part of this work has been submitted to any other journal for consideration at this point. You cannot submit to more than one. They also have this thing about conference presentations. If you submit something to one conference, you should ideally not be submitting it to another, not the same work, to another conference, because it's just one of those things. Right.
Thank you everyone for joining us and staying on. So we'll follow up. I've put my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out with any questions. And I can forward questions as well on to Dr. D'Souza. We'll have the recording available and send that out with all the links. So again, thank you very much.
And I'll wait for about a week, Ingrid, for your questions. If there's anything, I can incorporate it into the presentation and then send you one presentation.
That's a great idea. So you'll have a week and send a final version of the slides. Peer reviewed.
Yes,
almost.
peer reviewed. Thank you so much. And any comments are more than welcome.
Yes, we'd appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Yep. Bye.